right. Eddie.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining me, man. This is Eddie Smotherman, one of our city council members. And, I wanted to talk with you because, like we were saying earlier, there's not a lot of media coverage on this race, right? And so a lot of people have to just depend on what their friends say or what they've heard in the news. Oh, I was going to record it on this just in case. Get this out. Patience, everyone.
I guess if you can look at your phone during the interview, I'll
Yeah,
glance at mine
sure.
as well.
There you go. You can go to your notes.
I don't have any notes. I'm gonna speak straight from the heart, Gabriel.
I know that. That's what I like about you. I know that when if any reporter needs a quote, they know they can call Eddie and get one.
I answer the phone.
Right.
It doesn't matter who calls.
Exactly. And so, and you answer the call when I call you, right? We don't always agree, but you always take my call and you always hear me out, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, let's see here. I got a list of questions that I sent you. It was a while ago, so you may have forgotten them already.
I read through them.
Okay, so. Awesome. Let's see. What do you think? We'll start with. This is my favorite one. Some people in our community say that we don't have traffic problems. Do we have traffic problems, Eddie?
They don't drive. If they say that. Absolutely, Gabriel, we've got traffic problems. And one of the first things I did when I was elected, one of the first questions I was asked by Tommy Bragg was, how do you feel about the bridge over Broad Street? And because it had never had the votes to get approved in the city of Murfreesboro.
Right.
And I told him, I said, it will improve the situation. I said, the engineers tell me it will, not because I think it will. And he said, well, you got 4 votes then. So,
I have to admit that I was totally against it, and now I'm so glad it was built. So I'm a convert.
You want to say I was right?
Right. Yes, I do. I do want to say you were right. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So
I may have got lucky.
Well, I don't know, but you definitely were right on that, and I was against it, and so I'm glad that you got us that for sure. Let's see. And I'm glad you admit that we have traffic problems, because some people don't.
We do, and we've got several projects. The biggest thing in the budget probably is schools and road construction, and those are our major capital projects. The traffic problems are primarily on state routes.
Right, which
Memorial
ties your guys'
Boulevard.
hands a lot.
Right, because we don't have a whole lot of control over Broad Street and Oakville Parkway, because those are state roads.
Right.
And there's also not much room to widen, because
Sure.
the businesses have built up to the edge of the road in
Yeah.
many cases. And so those will continue to be challenging. The best thing we can do is try and relieve the intersections. And we've got plans to put a bridge over Northfield Boulevard at Broad Street, or actually over Broad Street at Northfield Boulevard. And as well, we plan to have a bridge in the next 15 years, probably crossing at Thompson Lane.
Sure.
That will cross Broad Street. And the whole deal is, whenever you're looking at infrastructure like that, anytime you've got interstates, rivers, and railroad tracks involved, about the only option you have is to get over them. Well, a bridge over Broad Street costs $28 million. So knowing that, you know that it takes a lot of funding, and those projects are hard to come by. So, we can fix all the problems with traffic, but you got to be willing to pay for them.
Sure.
And so, if you're going to complain about it, understand that it comes at a cost.
Yes, it does. Let's see. I'll save that one. That's a good one. So recently in the news, did my computer quit? No, good. All right. So recently in the news, the Black Lives Matter movement, right, has been, and when I sent you these questions, it was very much the thing that everyone was talking about.
Right.
And so, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement?
The Black Lives Matter movement, I think, is backed by Antifa, and we know that when they come to town, that there is an element that comes with them. That, for example, in the group that came to Murfreesboro, and not to put down any peaceful protester. I mean, you have the right for freedom of speech. You have the right to assemble, and even during COVID, people still have that ability to do that. the bigger thing is when we're telling people you can't go to church, but you're allowing people to assemble in large groups, there is a concern for health.
Sure.
And I think it's very important that we always, make sure that we understand, when you're dealing with people's health, you and I aren't wearing a mask right now. I hope we're
Right.
both safe. I mean, I check my temperature daily.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I think I had COVID back in December, early January. Fortunately, it was during the Christmas holiday season. There wasn't
Wow.
anything really going on with the
Yeah.
city, and I missed all the luncheons because I quarantined myself during that time period, even before COVID was even talked about. It was diagnosed as an upper respiratory infection. And I had
Okay.
every symptom that you could possibly have that would indicate COVID. So I think that I probably already had it.
Have you had the antibodies test?
I haven't, and
Okay.
I probably should, but if I'm normally not speaking,
Yeah.
I wear a mask. I encourage people to wear a mask,
Good.
but I think it should be your right to decide to wear one, because
Sure.
there's certain situations where you shouldn't be, and I certainly wouldn't want the police to pull up in front of the Ransom Schoolhouse here right now and go, "You guys need to put a mask on because you're outside." So I think there's a freedom thing and a rights thing that's involved here. Ben Franklin said, if you're willing to give up your freedom or willing to give up your liberty for freedom, you deserve neither.
Right.
And so actually freedom for safety. So if that's the case, then I think that we need to continue to look at back to your question, Black Lives Matter. We meet with groups daily, and in Murfreesboro, there's not a Democrat and a Republican problem. There's just a problem. In Murfreesboro, there's not a black and a white problem. It's just a problem. If somebody's being abused, it doesn't matter the color of their skin. They're being picked on because of the color of their skin. That's wrong.
Right.
If they're being overlooked because of the color of their skin, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what the color of your skin is. I think truthfully that every life is very important, and we hate that anyone feels oppressed. We do the best we can when someone brings it to our attention that they feel like they are, to make sure that we right any wrongs that are taking place. And the key is communication. We
Sure.
just have to keep talking, because when you stop talking, you've kind of built a wall there that makes it challenging.
Well,
I know
yeah.
you brought Black Lives.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Let me show you something here. 'Cause
Sure.
The other day, I was asked to attend a forum at the NAACP, and people are probably going to dog me because they're going to say, "Well, you're not communicating with the NAACP." And so, but I want to show you a picture here real quickly, and I'll just let you simply describe what it is you see.
I didn't know I was being interviewed.
Yeah. It's
What do you see here,
It's
sir?
both of us here. But this is the meeting that I was asked to leave from because I didn't wear a mask when I was going to speak.
I see your three competitors up there,
Yeah.
and I see no mask on any of them. I see them sitting as far apart as you and I are.
Right. And
Not 6 feet, I might add.
not 6 feet apart, and certainly not wearing masks. And
Right.
5 minutes prior to that photo, I was asked to leave that meeting because I was already on the stage. I was sitting on the edge of the stage, and they said, "Mr. Smotherman, if you're not going to put a mask on, you have to leave."
Huh.
Now, Gabriel, you and I both know that when we have a communication, it helps sometimes to be able to see a person's mannerisms, whether they're smirking when they tell you
Sure,
something,
sure.
or whether they're smiling when they tell you something. Are they genuine? I think facial optics is very important in a conversation, as well as body language.
Of course.
If I start leaning towards you,
Yeah, no, you can
it's
read a
it's
lot
more of an
from
aggressive
that.
mode,
Mhm.
and so so I think a lot is lost. And somebody asked me this on a comment last night. They said they were outraged because I had refused to wear a mask while speaking, and they said, "Hey, I wear them in an operating room." And I explained to them, I said, "Listen, what you say in an operating room is probably not going to be in the headlines on the newspaper the next morning."
It's true.
And that's why I think that communication is very important. And you lose some of that with a mask on. So when you're publicly speaking and you want to be understood, I get not wearing one.
Yeah.
And truly, I think all of us who do this not for a living, but publicly as a servant, I think we have the responsibility to be very aware of our health condition, that we may be at that point. like I said, I check my temperature daily. I'm required to because of work, and I know you're at MTSU as well, Gabriel.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to do the same thing if you're not back yet, or if you
No,
come
I'm back and I do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're reporting our temperature every day and making sure that we're monitoring our health. And if we had any symptoms whatsoever, I would hope we would take the personal responsibility amongst ourselves to say, I don't want to expose other people.
Sure.
Because COVID could be very, very dangerous to a certain segment of our population. Another segment of our population is probably just going to have a sore muscle or a runny nose or something, and life goes on, and they're not going, it's just a hiccup in their life.
Right.
But the dangerous effect is when you're dealing with that people who have underlying conditions and stuff. And yes, COVID is a very serious thing, and we need to take it seriously.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
It does.
I went all over the place on that.
No, I see as far as masks a little differently, but we'll talk about that later. We don't have to do that right now. I want to ask you, what was the hardest vote you had in the past 4 years? Any of them that I called you up on and disagreed with you?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I'm not going to say any of them was harder than the other because I think they're all important. I mean, every vote that we make, everybody fusses about the budget.
Right.
But the budget is the accumulation of what you put in your shopping cart getting up to the register.
Sure.
And I voted against many things that I said, for example, there was a budget that came, or a ordinance or purchase order that came before us that had a $2,800 picnic table to go next to the library. And I just said, I haven't seen a $2,800 picnic table. I'm sure there's some that probably more than that are gold plated.
Very nice picnic tables.
Yeah,
out there.
but it's not what I think we need in city government.
Sure.
I don't think that's so basically, and I know Bill was in strong support of it because it was for the library and his wife works for the library system. But but in our conversation, he's like, hey, I think you're being too hard on this, and I'm kind of like, well, let's just defer it. You get the picnic table out of there, and then bring it back, and we'll vote on it. So every vote is difficult.
Sure.
A couple years back, we voted on whether or not we should sell MED, and or Murfreesboro Electric, for those who don't recognize the acronym. But the Murfreesboro Electric was at that point. But the majority of their employees had come to me and said, Eddie, we don't want to be sold. We want to stay in the city of Murfreesboro.
Right.
As far as the governing body. And a couple of years later, the same exact people came to me and they said, Eddie, we've changed our mind. Well, the public can change their mind apparently, but if you're a politician, you can't.
Well, no, you're right, and I saw that, right? Like
Yeah.
in the chamber was full of employees there, and they, like in my opinion, they fired you guys, right? They're like, we want out of the city, we want to go work for these guys.
And that
over
was
here.
the biggest applause
It
of
was.
any applause that we've
Yeah.
had in agreement or booze
Right,
and disagreement of a vote that I have seen in the 8 years that I've been there. But conditions changed, and,
Yep.
and certainly, I think it gives the city an opportunity to reduce the size of its actual physical government as far as the number of employees we have and benefits that we
Sure,
provide
sure.
and the
liability
liability and
issues,
risk
yep,
and all
yep.
those things. That relieved the city of it, and it released it back to the private sector where a co-op can manage it and they can run it the way they want to. So, but the service will be the same. It's going to be the same trucks with the same people sitting inside of them with a different name tag and a different badge on the side of the door.
Right.
So that was probably one that people would say, well, Eddie changed his mind on it, or Eddie voted one way, or he said something and then he did something else. So basically, we're constantly listening to the people that it affects. And so when you're talking about a neighborhood or something like that, we've had several neighborhood ones where it's just really challenging to try and explain to people that the city of Murfreesboro is growing, and they're just anti-growth, and they don't want Murfreesboro to get any larger. And I get that. I love Little Murfreesboro. I grew up in Little Murfreesboro.
Well, when you're sitting in traffic all day,
Right.
in their defense, that's what they, when they hear growth, they hear it's going to take me longer to get
Right,
across town. So
And when they come to our town, we're going to need more firefighters. We're going to need more fire stations. We're going to need more police officers. We're going to need a bigger police station. We're going to, or headquarters.
Yeah.
We're going to need more
Headquarters.
roads. We're going to need, several things that schools. I mean, the list goes on and on. When somebody comes to town and gets off the bus and says, "I'm here in Murfreesboro. This is the best city I've ever been in my life," you know, I'm glad they do that. But on the other side, they haven't committed a dime to the infrastructure at that point. And I've encouraged the city to go the direction of impact fees.
Right.
I haven't gotten very far with it because obviously I don't have the votes, and it doesn't really matter what your topic is. You and I both agree absolutely that the city of Murfreesboro, you may be for pure districts, but I'm for hybrid.
Okay.
I think there would be a excellent opportunity to have 4 at-large members, 4 district members, and a mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So you would increase the governance by 2 people.
Sure.
But you would have people that would be held accountable for each area of town.
Right.
But you don't want it to get too weighted that direction, because then you go into the negotiation deal.
Right. It's horse trading then.
Right. Then it's, you know, if you want a swimming pool in your neighborhood, I want a playground in my area.
Sure.
You vote for mine, I'll vote for yours. All you've done is increase the amount of cost to run the city.
Right. Right.
So you have to be careful when you're doing that. But we always look at it as, you know.
If you're reelected, are you willing to bring that forward and try to get some?
It won't
some
go
changes?
anywhere. There's no support for it. And you know, there's other things that I really, you know, I campaigned on 8 years ago.
But if there was a second up there, if there was somebody else that agreed with what you just said, that expanding the council could be a good thing, would.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting to hear a challenger always when they run against you. They will always say the same things I said when, you know, I want better pay for our employees and I don't want a tax increase. Well, the reality is once you get in the seat, you'll figure out that you can't give people more money, salaries, if it doesn't come from somewhere.
The taxes, sure.
And
or cutting something.
Or cutting something.
And yeah.
And so, you know, if you want to do away with the Greenway, it gives us a lot of money to spend on things.
Sure.
If you want to do away with Barfield Park, it gives us a lot of money. If you want to shut down SportsCom. But those things are what most people consider quality of life issues, which
Right.
really does make Murfreesboro unique. When a company looks at Murfreesboro, and we're trying to attract everything from aerospace to Costco, and we have to make sacrifices in order to get those good-paying jobs to come here, because we always look at good-paying jobs as something that this community needs. We don't need more people on the interstate between Murfreesboro and Nashville. We know that. So we are trying to attract good-paying jobs. And the way you attract good-paying jobs is you set up an environment that's attractive for companies to say, I want to be in that city.
Sure.
And so that's part of what takes place.
Now, you're a former small business owner.
Yes, sir.
And when you see the government giving away an incentive to get a Costco to come to town, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like I've been abused, because I've been a small business owner on the other side of that coin.
Sure.
And I'm going, you didn't give me a thing, and you're giving Costco a break.
Right.
But I was never going to create jobs that were going to pay $60,000 a year in my little jewelry store. You mentioned my business. I'll speak about it briefly, because I know that one of the rumors that was started by the president of the Roanoke County Party, Daniel Gammons, had made a comment that my business had gone bankrupt. Well, nothing's further from the truth, but it doesn't keep him from lying. And when he does that, I call him and say, Daniel, why'd you say that? And he says, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Well, that doesn't mean that it hadn't gone out on Facebook and the damage has been done.
Well, that's why I wanted to sit down with you and so
set
the record straight.
Yeah, Gabriel. So the fact is, nothing's further from the truth. My business made money the day it opened. It made money the day it closed. And I was thankful that I had the opportunity. I didn't have the time to stay in the business, because I had made a commitment to the city of Murfreesboro as far as a public servant that I would do the very best I could for the term that I was elected for. And I didn't have time to run a business at the level that I was involved with that business and provide the service that I had promised that I would do. So in order to keep my promise, I closed my business. And I was ready for retirement. I'd worked at Nissan in the administrative side for 18 and a half years.
Okay.
Loved working at Nissan. Nissan has changed so many lives in the city of Murfreesboro.
Of course.
And of course, Rutherford County and surrounding areas.
And they got a great deal to come here.
And they got a great deal to come
and
here.
it changed this whole area.
But it changed everything.
Yep.
We've got neighborhoods in Murfreesboro that would have never existed that have extremely
and
nice
lots of
homes
other
on.
businesses, right, that have come
right.
from that. So
And
I
those
agree.
people who have good incomes go out and spend money, and when they spend that money, that generates sales tax and revenue. That your city's either growing or it's dying.
Right.
And there's no point that you can say, well, let's just build a wall around it and let some town next to you pay for it, and we're going to stay on our island and we're not going to let anybody come in from the outside. That's not a good thing to do. We need young people to come into our community. We've got a university here that attracts 20-some-odd thousand students each year, and they come to our community, and many of them stay here because it's a better place.
I came here.
Yeah.
I stayed here because of what you're about to say.
It's a better place than where they lived, and since the Garden of Eden, people have looked for a place that is better than the place they're at. And I've mentioned a couple of times publicly that I was standing on the sideline at a football game up in Michigan a year or so back, and there was a highway patrolman standing next to me that was from Michigan Highway Patrolman. We didn't say anything for the first half because obviously I thought he was doing his job and I didn't want to interfere. But at halftime he looked at me and he said, "Sir," he said, "what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think we've led a little bit of the football game, which kind of surprises me, and we've had fun, and you've led the majority of it at this point." And I said, "At the end of the game, we're going to get on an airplane with a really big check, and we thank you for inviting us up, and we've had a good time." Yeah. And he's just kind of smiled, and he said, "No, that's not what I meant." He said, "What do you think about Detroit?" And I said, "To be honest with you, I haven't seen any of Detroit. We came here, we went to the football stadium. Everybody's been nice to us while we're here, and we're flying out as soon as the game's over." And he was like, "Well," he said, "I'm retiring in 2 years." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Congratulations on your retirement." I said, "What are you going to do when you retire?" He said, "I'm moving to Murfreesboro, Tennessee."
Wow, land of low taxes, man, right?
And that's what he said. And I said, "Why Murfreesboro?" I said, "There's thousands of cities in the United States. Why did you pick Murfreesboro?" He said, "Low taxes. Quality of life, as far as it's a good place for my grandkids to get an education. I love the music, I love the food, and the people are nicer." And I'm kind of like, well, I understand why you're coming, and you're exactly right, but don't tell everybody you know.
Right. Sure.
So we've got a great city, and that's not by luck. The city that we enjoy has had many tough decisions made. And some right, some wrong.
Sure.
And but the cumulative effect has created a really nice city. We're sitting here in front of the Ransom Schoolhouse, which I think Murfreesboro has done a good job of trying to preserve our history, trying to educate people on our history. It's open from 9 o'clock to noon every Saturday. If anybody hadn't been here and seen it, I encourage you to come. I know you said you hadn't been inside,
right.
and
I
hope
will
you get
here in a little
inside.
bit. Yeah.
And
let me ask you just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. So if you're reelected for another term, what is going to be your priority going forward? Like, what are some things that you want to accomplish in the next 4 years?
Gabriel, I think the one thing that I'm really going to try to push is for term limits.
Okay.
And even district representation. You can do things when you're fixing to leave that you can't do because you're afraid you're going to not be quite the statesman that the people you work with would like you to be.
Right.
So your last term, you're kind of unbridled. When you say, "This is my last term and this is absolutely it," I don't think anybody should serve more than 3 terms.
Would that have changed any of your votes if you knew like this past term was like going to be your last term?
I don't think it would have changed anything. I'd have tried to get things expedited because there's some road projects that I would have loved to have seen gotten finished before I leave, because if they don't get finished and they pull all the funding away from them, it's going to hurt traffic.
Sure.
The church project, the Methodist church project,
Yep.
a huge project that I have worked so hard to preserve that church and the bell tower, because I think they're staples of the downtown area, and I think they project Murfreesboro's history extremely well. There were people who complained when we bought the property and stuff to try and do that. We wound up selling the property off, and
I'm raising my hand because I'm one of the people.
Yeah. But if that
I just
project,
complained about the vote, man.
Yeah.
I think that if you own stock in the bank, you needed to step away from the vote. And evidently, I'm a bad guy because I thought that out loud. So.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
If you've got a conflict of interest, you don't need to be on the council to begin with.
Well, we all have conflicts somewhere, right?
Well,
but
what is
you
mine?
shouldn't let it.
What do you think mine
Well, you
is?
work for MTSU.
Yeah.
That's a conflict of interest on something. There's bound to be something that's crossed your desk that involves MTSU because it's a big employer? I mean,
It is, Gabriel, but I tell you, I'm a part-time employee. I work about 4 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week. I'm not a full-time employee of MTSU. I do it as a part-time job just because I love working in flowers. I'd be out in my yard doing it, and how I wound up doing it was one day I was talking with Dr. McPhee, and he asked me at a ribbon cutting, he said, "What are you going to do after you leave here?" And I said, "I'm going to go home and I'm going to dig in my garden because that's what I love to do." And he said, "We've got a greenhouse you can work in, and it won't be quite as hot." And I was kind of like, "I'd love to do that," and I would do it for nothing. I mean, I make minimum wage. I mean, 3 days a week, and I'm out there like right now. I'm working about 4 to 5 hours a day.
Okay.
So maybe 15 hours a week. I'm not committed to MTSU for anything.
Well,
so
I didn't know. So, but I just I think as a spectator, because I've never sat in those seats, right? Like, it just seems like there are times when maybe you should step away. Maybe you should, you know. And
I agree. If you're a banker or if you're a realtor or you have some kind of investment that into the property that's being discussed, you absolutely should excuse yourself.
Right.
I have excused myself on a couple items that came up about MTSU because I thought, my vote doesn't really matter here, and I have done that.
Yeah.
But the reality is when we talk about MTSU.
Well, would you stuck around if they needed your vote?
Do what now?
Would you have stuck around? Because you just said if my vote didn't matter.
Oh, if my vote hadn't mattered even more, I'd have definitely stepped away.
Okay, all right.
Because
just making sure.
Yeah.
I want to clarify so that way
absolutely.
One of your listeners don't hear something there.
Yeah, so. The Facebook warriors, they're going to beat me up either way, so don't worry about it. But
I'm getting cooked by this sun right now. Just wait, it's going to get over there and get you in a minute.
Well, we can scoot around.
No, this is all good. I've got one last question for you. Let's see. What is a problem that you foresee the city will have to deal with in the next 4 years?
The biggest problem, no doubt, facing the city right now is what is going to happen with our budget, because the city is taking a heavy impact because of the economy being shut down. The next couple years, we've still got racial issues that need to be addressed, and we definitely have the economic situation that's
Do you think
looming.
the city of Murfreesboro has racism issues that needs to be addressed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you've got one person who feels like they're being abused or neglected or mistreated because of race, then you've got a problem.
How do you feel about body cameras?
We've actually had a few officers try them. The challenge with body cameras is the data storage.
Okay.
It's extremely expensive. How do you store it? What do you store? There's a lot of questions.
You think in that $20-some million building we built, they could store some body cameras?
If you want us to spend more money out there, I'll be glad to do it, Gabe. But I've already heard enough.
What a boondoggle that thing turned into, man. Because I don't remember that being the price tag in the beginning. I think that's what
it wasn't the price tag in the beginning.
Right.
But the number that was thrown around early was the price of the construction of the building.
Okay.
That didn't consider the price of the property and those
facilities inside the building.
But I will say that our city manager at that time took liberties of approving things that probably shouldn't have been approved without the council knowing. And I'm not going to say it cost him his job. He retired. He resigned from the city. But I will be completely honest with you and say it wasn't under some pressure.
Okay.
There weren't enough votes to fire him. Personally, I would have voted to fire the guy because I thought there was grounds for that. How do I know what?
That there weren't enough votes.
But because we had attorney-client meetings and we discussed
Gotcha. I mean,
the legal matters, and you can tell by people's conversations,
where they're standing on it.
You don't have to say where you're gonna vote.
Okay.
And so we all had met with the attorneys. The attorneys conveyed to us, you don't have the votes. So basically, it's not like we got together and sat around over a couple beers and had a conversation one night by the pool saying, how you gonna vote on that? That didn't happen.
Okay.
But there is the opportunity for us to find out kind of where the rest of the council is leaning, and usually they don't even mention names when we talk to the attorneys and say, hey, I feel this way about this particular topic. Where are you at on it? As far as legal. Can we do this? Can we not do this? Oftentimes the answer is you can do it legally, but you don't have the support to get it done.
So you mentioned that the city planner from before caused some problems for us. How do you feel about a full-time mayor? Because that would get rid of that position, right? Like, or definitely lower the amount of power in it.
Again, Gabriel, you're talking about increasing spending, and I love talking to people about the opportunity to increase spending. Because I'm not in favor of increasing spending.
Okay.
And so as long as we've got somebody that will work full time for a part-time salary, because we're servants, and
Sure.
and when you start getting the salary up to like the county mayor's position, then it becomes much more competitive.
Yeah, but what do we pay our city manager? How much do we pay him?
The city manager makes, I think, about 180 something like that.
So almost what Bill Ketchern makes.
Yes,
maybe more than what Bill Ketchern makes.
But he is managing probably 1,300 employees.
Right, but what I'm saying is if you took away his position and you gave it to someone that's totally elected, totally held accountable by the people, you could pay him 180 grand, and I bet we could get people that run for that position.
Every mayor has a chief operating officer.
Okay.
And you go to Davidson County, you've got a chief operating officer that does the same thing that a city manager does without the title.
Okay.
The problem is when you start making the job attractive because of the money. The mayor makes $1,000 a month.
Right,
we make $950 a month.
Right. You guys don't do it for the money.
We're glad to tell you what we make.
Right, exactly.
I realize. And I can tell you how many hours I spend each month working on city projects, and you'd go, man, you ain't making $1 an hour.
I know that. Right.
And like so we're public servants. We're not doing it for the money.
You do have some decent benefits.
We do get the advantage of using the city's insurance policy, but we pay for our insurance,
you're
portion
part
of it,
of the
just
pool.
like anybody else would. So
yeah.
it's part of the pool deal, and so that's, and only about half of the members I think even use that.
Okay.
But we've got an opportunity that when you have. You want people to commit to the mayor's job because of enthusiasm that they have for making the city better.
Right.
I don't think we could have a better mayor than Shane McFarland, and I know that's going to make some people mad me saying that. He's young, he's enthusiastic, he's intelligent, and he is a great leader. He can take a group of people and direct them. And
he got that MED deal done. I haven't approved of all the ways he got it done, but man, he got it done.
Yeah,
and he had problems getting it done before, right?
Right,
so made some changes. And he got it done.
Right,
so.
and flexibility is part of the negotiation of government. I mean, you have to understand that city government is nothing more than a service business. We provide a service to the citizens of Murfreesboro.
Sure.
Whether it be trash pickup, or whether it be schools, or whether it be law enforcement, or fire protection, and all those things that we provide. That's what government does. Mm-hmm. And if the private sector would do those, we wouldn't need the government doing those. But in many cases, there's not a profit to be made in it, and if there's not a profit to be made in it, the private sector will never invest in it.
Right.
So
at least not at the levels that the city would, right? Because we have volunteer fire departments, things like that.
Right.
But so last question.
Murfreesboro's got an ISO 1 rating, which is the highest rating.
Right, like lowers your
fire. So
we have a great fire department.
That will lower people's homeowners insurance, and more than that, it will have a larger effect on businesses.
Sure.
So I mean, it can have as much as a 30% effect on your payment of insurance if you're a business.
That's awesome.
So it will be a true benefit.
Are you knocking on doors? I'm gonna circle back to COVID and close this thing down here. So
I'm not knocking on doors. I don't want anybody to knock on my door, and I'm not gonna knock on anybody's door.
So if this is your one chance to talk to somebody and try to is there anything you want to say to people out there if this is your chance to talk to them?
Well, I mean, look at my record. I mean, I've been a councilman for 8 years. I'm accessible. If you call me, I'll answer the phone. If you need something that in the middle of the night, you pick up the phone and call me. My cell phone will ring, and I will answer your call.
Wow.
My number's readily available, and I've done everything from had a lady call me and said there was a dead possum in front of her house. And I said, ma'am, you don't have a dead possum in front of your house. And she said, Mr. Smotherman, I have a dead possum in front of my house, and I want somebody to pick it up. I said, well, that's not the city's responsibility, but I'll take care of it. And she said, well, why do you feel I don't have one? And I said, because I rode by your house and you got a dead raccoon in front of your house. And so I immediately went over and picked up her dead raccoon and disposed of it properly. And so we do things that people don't see.
Sure.
And of course we vote on things like MED and fire stations and things that and budgets even.
Right.
That people are going to be upset about. And I mean, I mentioned the budget, and I'll finish up with budget. The year before, we had the 34% increase. The year before that, what the public has never mentioned was we had a 26-cent decrease. We dropped the rate 26 cents from $1.20 to 94 cents.
Okay.
And so when we came back and said, okay, we've run out of land, because we were led to believe, and this was part of the reason we have a new city manager, we were led to believe that we were fine situation on the budget. Well, the truth was our budget was being propped up by $20 million sales each year on the Gateway property that we were selling off. We ran out of property in the Gateway.
Right.
And so when that happened, we were in trouble, and we could either continue to borrow money and increase our debt,
right,
or we could address the problem, which was a very hard one to address.
Sure.
And so we made an extremely difficult
years
decision.
of poor decisions led to that tax raise, is what you're saying then.
Well, and
am I understanding that correctly?
Well, and some of that decision was based off of that information, because the person who was responsible for the budget, you know, the city council does not put the budget together.
Right.
We have a paid staff that does that.
Sure.
And we review that, and so we absolutely know that. You know, we should have confidence in the people that we have that are professionals,
right,
whether
right.
they're engineers or whether they're financial consultants or whoever, and all that information gets reviewed by people who are experts in that field. Nobody had ever pointed out to us that they had a concern with what was going on with the budget. Everybody was saying it's a good budget, you know, full speed ahead. Well, we figured out at a certain point that it wasn't. We weren't being told the complete truth.
Okay.
And so we had to fix the problem. And because the year before, like I said, we went from $1.20 to 94 cents. The year before, we dropped it 24 cents.
Yeah.
So at 26 cents. And so so if you drop it 26 cents, and then the next year you needed to increase it to 34 cents, you're going up 8 cents.
Right.
But if we hadn't have dropped it the year before, it would have been an 8-cent increase. And would it have been criticized? Sure, a 1-cent increase would be criticized.
Yeah, every
so everybody says, you know, I want to do things incrementally.
Yeah.
But Gabriel, if I knew next year we're going to need $3, and a person who says incrementally, I would like for you to implement that so that you get your $3 next year, but you should have done it in the past. So basically, I could have last year got $1 from you, this year got $2 from you, and next year I get $3 from you. Next year, at the point that you start paying the $3, you've given me $6 when really all I needed was $3.
I see. Sure.
And so you don't want the government storing and warehousing all this money.
Right.
That because we're not in the financial business, I hope.
Sure. You shouldn't be.
I realize that we do have a operational reserve that we have in place for situations like COVID, and we should. I mean, we
and it helps credit ratings and makes bonds cheaper.
But we don't want to lay off
for
firefighters and police officers and teachers and stuff because we can't afford to pay them.
Sure.
And so we absolutely know that there has to be an operational reserve in place, and we have that. And it's actually just built into the fund balance, which has to stay somewhere between 15 and 30% of your annual budget. And so we generally stay on the high end of that. We usually stay around the 30% mark. It's a $200 million budget. We usually stay around $60 million. If it starts getting too high, we'll spend off some of it on capital projects and make sure that we don't get too high. But at the same time, we don't want it to get so low that, you know, who 3 years ago would have said, you know, you're fixing to go through an economic crash because unemployment was down at the lowest it ever been.
No one saw it coming.
For minorities and women and everybody. I mean, we just had a really, really low unemployment rate, which also meant it made it more challenging for the city to try and retain employees because if you don't increase your pays and pay and be competitive when the job market's wonderful, then you're going to lose your employees. And so it's a balancing act. But you know you want to provide quality services, and the only way you can provide quality services is having quality employees. And the city tries to maintain those.
Well, Eddie, thank you for sitting down with me.
Vote for Eddie Smotherman.
I really appreciate it.
I would love one more term. I would love to be able to address some of those things like, you know, certainly we want to make sure we look at the opportunity that we have if there is a chance for district representation, if there is a chance for term limits, if there is a chance for those things that people say they want that I told them that I would try and deliver. You might remember when I first ran for office, they said, Eddie, you'll never be able to change the election date.
And you got it done.
And I got it done.
Yeah.
Not because I could get the council members to go along with it, but I got them to put it on a referendum
Right.
and let the public decide.
Sure.
Which overwhelmingly wound up being a situation that we wound up getting it passed. You know, the public absolutely supported it, but I couldn't
Right.
get the politicians to support it.
And
so even
and I appreciate that.
you got to fight the good fight.
Thank you.